You are listening to MCC Votes and Seats, the podcast series of the Center for Political Science of Mathias Corvinus Collegium. We provide election insights with experts and politicians. This time, we'll discuss the background, the outcome, and the possible repercussions of the legislative, regional, and local elections that took place in Serbia on the 17th of December last year. It is our greatest pleasure having Dr. Miša Đurković, a principal research fellow at the Institute of European Studies, Belgrade, who will hopefully guide us through the deep forest of Serbian party politics. Zdravo, Miša, how are you?
Jonapot, thank you very much for this nice introduction, and it's very interesting about the term you've been using. Some of the oppositional people speak that we are already in the swamp in a way. So many of very interesting things were happening there.
Indeed. So let's get started. SNS, the Serbian Progressive Party of head of state Aleksandar Vucic, won resoundingly, securing twice as many votes and seats in the National Assembly as their nearest rival. All this provides SNS a clear majority of almost 49%. That translates to 129 parliamentary mandates, 9 deputies more compared to the latest election. Additionally, the center-right party triumphed in 165 municipalities, including Belgrade, by sweeping the regional and municipal elections. After this brief overview of the situation, let's start with the first and, I think, most important question. According to law, the next parliamentary election was supposed to take place in the year 2026. For what reason did Aleksandar Vucic announce an early election, and why exactly the 17th of December was chosen?
In a way, people are joking, and it's part of our internal understanding of the politics that there's a saying that he is the best in leading the campaign. And actually, if it was up to him, he would do that every year and all the time. There are two very significant reasons, actually. The first one was that he was very unsatisfied with the results of the last parliamentary elections that were held in April 22. They were in the midst of the start of the Ukrainian crisis, so he was insisting actually that SPS of his minor coalition or partner, but then again rival in some sense, SPS, 3 lists of the radical right used that situation to win more votes than he was expecting that might get, actually, for the reaction of the people, very strong anti-NATO feeling and so on and so on. Of course, he was satisfied with presidential elections in which he won. We have to remember 60% in the first row, but parliamentary elections were less than 45%, which was not enough from his perspective, actually, and they got less than a majority, which meant that he was depending on SPS in a way. So there were rumors that he started to prepare another elections immediately after the first one. And he was just waiting for the right time to go with them, which he used actually after the big protests that were going in spring and half of the summer, after the horrible accidents that we had with the massive school shooting in Belgrade, and 2 days later in some small town near Belgrade, Mladenovac, in which almost 20% in 2 accidents were killed. So there were big protests, which didn't give result. Actually, they are massive, especially in Belgrade. But somehow opposition didn't succeed to really politically use them. And already in the end of the summer, beginning of September, it was clear that this energy was slowly drawing off. He used their invitation, their call for the elections, but then again, he used that in some campaign that was really, technically speaking, masterfully organized and implemented. And there are the other part of the reasons, so the reasons we could say. Serbia, as you all know, has a very complex international position in a situation in which we didn't introduce sanctions toward Russia. We are still out of NATO, although surrounded by NATO countries. And there are big pressures on Kosovo issue and Republika Srpska more and more. So in that sense, there are some resemblance to what he's doing now with what Gruevski used to do in the late phases of his ruling in Macedonia. he started to have the problem with international factors. So he was going almost every 1.5 years with the elections. So this is the other reason that actually he, in a way, bought the time to get at least a couple of months or 6 months to avoid the pressures from the West, because our internal politics is very much connected with general international development. And in a way, he's hoping that occupation of Americans with their elections and European elections that are scheduled for June this year will mean that the pressure will decrease towards Serbia. So he, in a way, organized early election to get 3-4 months to avoid the future pressure and so on. As we saw from the results, he bought several months and he won much more votes than before. Now they have a clear majority on their own. And another problem that he also solved in a way, several of the right-wing lists that were attacking him strongly were now not in the parliament, like Zavetnici, Dveri, or Narodna partija of Vuk Jeremić.
I understand, and we will definitely discuss the election results later on in more detail. But besides the Belgrade school shooting, as well as the mass murder near Mladenovac and Smederevo, it is argued that the Banjska attack in North Kosovo was also one of the main motivations for the snap ballot. How did that event connect to the elections and the party politics in Serbia?
There were many accusations from outside that actually this was kind of planned insurgency in which Vucic was trying to destabilize Kosovo via Radojcic. This is not really a rational way to explain, because this was a very small group of people, and definitely if there was some serious undermining planning, it would include more fighters, it would include more engagement of the Serbian military and so on. There is another hypothesis actually that the nature of the accident was connected with the criminal activities, and that actually some shipments, if I could say, of the transport of some illegal means was included, and actually that the whole accident started due to this. There are also internal accusations in Serbia that Mr. Radojcic was doing this not for the purpose, if I could say, of Serbia, but for some other big powers, because the result of that is that Kurti regained legitimacy internationally, and so on and so on. So we still don't have clear data. It seems that everyone, including international community, is interested to somehow put all that was happening in Banjska under the carpet. It is also connected with the pressure from outside. They started to pressure him also for Radojcic and for Banjska. I could say from what we have now that the whole event was much more connected with criminal activities than with real political background.
Was it clearly advantageous for the ruling Serbian Progressive Party to have the legislative and the municipal elections at the same time?
Yes, actually, opposition, especially so-called pro-Western opposition led by Mr. Đilas, was insisting very much to separate. That was one of their most important calls, actually, because it was very clear that within these elections, the only serious goal of the opposition was Belgrade, actually. We were having parliamentary election. We also had Vojvodina elections in which SNS got it with very huge majority there. Even biggest parties of the opposition are de facto non-existent. Not even single oppositional party has any serious infrastructure within the central Serbia. So that's why they're focused on Belgrade, and they wanted to avoid direct involvement of Aleksandar Vucic with the elections. They wanted to make it to be strictly local, if I may say, but then again, Belgrade is making 1/3 almost of the whole Serbia population. So what Vucic did is not to give them and to put Belgrade elections within, which were again early elections. That was again something that opposition asked, and he gave them, but putting that together with parliamentary elections, which were led by him personally. The campaign was totally personalized. He was the only person from SNS that was seen leading all that. The point was that actually he used his personal popularity and legitimacy that he has to lift up results of at the parliamentary elections, and even in Belgrade, which were seen from the point of view of opposition has very clear possibility to get majority. And even that they couldn't deliver on that. They are now even, and probably there will be another early Belgrade elections, probably in the May or June next year, with the rest of the municipalities that were not announced and called now. For example, two biggest towns apart from Belgrade, Novi Sad and Niš, in which, according to the polls, SNS is not doing so fine. He will have much better position within next 6 months because some of the potential opponents from the right-wing opposition are non-existent now. In technical terms, he did that really masterfully, and he succeeded to avoid what opposition wanted to have Belgrade as a separate parliamentary elections.
Now let's move on and turn to the parliamentary elections results. You had the electoral list Serbia Must Not Stop, led by Serbian Progressive Party and consisting of smaller center-left, single-issue and right-wing parties like the Social Democratic Party of Serbia and so on and so forth. There was Serbia Against Violence, an anti-corruption, pro-EU big tent opposition coalition formed out of the Serbia Against Violence protests. Serbia Against Violence secured 24% of the votes. That gives the electoral coalition 65 mandates in the 250-strong National Assembly, 25 deputies more compared to what its predecessor, the United for the Victory of Serbia Electoral Alliance, had in 2022. And of course, the list is quite long and extensive. What can be said about the performance and the pre-election activities of the political parties, election alliances, and electoral lists running in the ballot?
I can hardly recall any slogan, but Serbia cannot stop. That means really how successful other campaigns were. The whole campaign was totally personalized, which is, we have to mention that, against the constitution, because according to our constitution, our president should not be doing this kind of stuff. Actually, Vucic did the same what Boris Tadic was doing at his time, and even Slobodan Milošević, they were all the time ignoring this provision from our constitution. Concerning the possible challenges that he might have at this moment, actually, especially with Kosovo issue, his background, and with many of the concessions that he gave to international community. So he was very strongly criticized from something that at one moment seemed like a possible, very strong right-wing coalition organized by 4 or 5 political parties. And they started to go together 1.5 years. I'm speaking about Dveri, Zavetnici, another coalition, and even Vuk Jeremić's National Party or People's Party, if I could say. They started together, and at one moment it looked like they might have serious right-wing coalition criticizing SNS from the right, that they might have together almost 50 to 20%, and that would be a really big problem. So his main task, which he performed very wisely, was to, in different ways, facilitate their split, and it ended up by only one political party surviving of them, and this is another coalition, or it's mostly Novi DSS led by Miloš Jovanović, which turned in the meantime toward Đilas, toward this pro-European coalition. He used their, I think, also financial support, but also media that are controlled by Đilas and his partner, Mr. Šolak. All other parties were totally destroyed, but SNS in fantastic way took the whole discourse of their campaign, and the campaign was very warm, very populistic, but in a good sense, orientated toward demography, toward invitation of the Serbian people from diaspora to return back, promising of the further investment, infrastructural development, increase of the pensions and wages in Serbia. This was a very successful campaign. How it resulted with 47% almost that he won. On the other side, pro-European coalition led by Mr. Đilas, at their media and their performance were sounding like people said, the Black Chronic in journals, for example, criticizing, which is of course something that is expected, speaking about corruption, showing many misuses about the public funds, about the investment and so on. But then again, coming to the real political program and offering to the people, they didn't show anything. I cannot recall neither their slogan. Visually, it was very bad performance with billboards and so on. For them, these 23% are almost big success, actually, concerning very bad campaign. But in Belgrade, they played very bad. They won 6% less than Vucic's list, although it was expected that they will probably gain Belgrade on their own. And to have support of the other smaller oppositional parties, the choosing of the leaders that led Ms. Tepic and Mr. Aleksić was also not very fortunate event. They didn't succeed to transform this energy from the protest into real success, neither in Belgrade. There is huge disappointment among the people who are oppositionally orientated in Serbia, in the sense that there is a big energy from different sides, from the left and the right. On the other hand, the awareness that the offering at the political spectrum is getting worse and worse. In order to get the change in the power in Serbia, it is necessary first to get the change at the leadership in opposition, which is really performed very bad. Just to illustrate, they were again not able on their own to offer the first results 2 hours after the elections. Allegedly, again, software that they were using fell down. And concerning the smaller parties that survived, there is a significant loss in Ivica Dačić, which fell from 12 to 6.5%. It was also very bad populist campaign, but very stupid in the sense that they used as the main Trump grandson of late Slobodan Milošević, who came out of nowhere, and they tried on some kind of nostalgia for Tito and Milošević, but simply it didn't work. And they also have the problem that there is less and less young people that want to fill their roles. They are becoming part of the almost retired people, very old people, and so on and so on. Beside them, these are, if I could say, three the most serious groupings that we had, although SPS is becoming less significant. There are now only two groups that survived. One is Miloš Jovanović, who is a young professor of law from the Belgrade faculty, educated with a very good public performance. He's good looking and so on, and they are playing on national conservative issue, but then again de facto they now enter into some kind of informal coalition with the pro-European parties, and they are criticized by the rest of the right-wing opposition as the biggest traitor, the main reason why it didn't make the big bloc. But although he is close to Đilas now, it was interesting that they were allowed to have their ads at the national television, which was not allowed to the rest of the smaller oppositional parties. And the fifth, actually the only new party or new voice that we will have in the parliament now, is the grouping around Professor pulmonologist Nestorović, who came out as a big symbol of anti-COVID measures and anti-vaccine party in Serbia. I mean, he's very respected. He's the best pulmonologist probably of the Balkans. But in his late time, he started to deal with so many things. What is interesting with this, they call them YouTube coalition. It is actually consisted mostly of 7 people together with Nestorović, who came to some kind of celebrity status via internet, podcast, different YouTube activities, totally hardline pro-Russian. It's actually, they are something like, Beppe Grillo for the time being, which were pumped and supported, pushed by Vucic's media and Vucic's infrastructure in order to destroy the previous challengers from the right wing. And they also took a couple of percentage from Ivica Dačić. Now they are holding this position in the parliament, and they are holding the crucial votes in the Belgrade parliament. Actually, everything depends on them. So they might choose if we're going to go for another elections, or they will probably go at some screenplay with Vucic. They said that they will not go in coalition with Đilas and so on. But the point is that everybody who is not connected with Đilas is, if we could say, this grouping is the only substantial opposition because it has its own media and it has its own financial means. All other political factors within Serbia are totally dependent on Vucic because he controls media, he controls financial sectors, and for the time being, you could enter as a small party in the parliament only if you have some kind of support from him. Now we have the situation in which many people are dissatisfied, but there are no serious and relevant channels that this dissatisfaction could be streamed somehow, which is the situation which for the time being is giving Vucic full control over political life in Serbia.
Those formations you just mentioned, NADA, National Democratic Alternative for Serbia, and the Voice from the People, these two formations have gained 13 seats each in the 250-strong National Assembly, while Ivica Dačić's electoral coalition gained 18 seats. So you mentioned that more than a month after the elections, you cannot really recall any slogans or billboards from the campaign. But what about the election process itself? Earlier in September 2023, a group of opposition parties led by the parliamentary groups Forward to Europe and the Green Left Front requested the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe to assess the conditions for the elections in Serbia. In exchange, incumbent Prime Minister Ana Brnabić also called the OSCE to monitor the elections, claiming that the opposition parties are frivolous and are causing chaos. At the end, the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights observed the election process. What findings did they make? What conclusions did they reach to?
On the day of the elections, there were many data about some things which were not happening before and which, from the perspective of EU and ODIHR mission, were seriously questioning legitimacy of the elections, especially in Belgrade. The biggest problem was actually that allegedly several dozens of thousands of people were brought from Republika Srpska and were used in order to lift up the election success of the ruling party. And after that, oppositional media, but also some international factors found out that there were really some, if I could say funny, but very dangerous things, that you could find 200 voters applied at a small flat, for example, one, which means that there are really serious allegations and the data that some illegitimate things were happening around. You could see that from the first statement of European Commission. That was the first time that they seriously questioned the legitimacy of the whole electoral process in Serbia. Immediately after the elections, opposition started with some kind of protest, which included also hunger strike of several of the MPs and political leaders like Marinika Tepić and so on. They didn't have some significant support of the people, that should be said, but they succeeded to alarm especially European factors, if I could say. It was very easy to see that especially German political elite, including the government, the Bundestag, was very unsatisfied with the whole process, but also we could connect that with the general turning of the Aleksandar Vucic from previously very good relationship with Angela Merkel to open critique or almost from time to time very non-diplomatic words that are addressing Germany as the main supporter of the opposition and the main subject that is allegedly undermining internal stability of Serbia. On the other hand, the American ambassador and the Russian ambassador criticized this kind of behavior of opposition and said that there were not significant, according to them, obstacles within the democratic process. The most serious critique came from the Bundestag, actually. Some of the voices in European Parliament and in European Council, in which especially Green and Social Democratic forces were criticizing the whole process, including all those data that they were getting from oppositional media about voters that Migratory Board from Republika Srpska, and which really helped Aleksandar Vucic to preserve control over Belgrade for the time being. We are waiting, I think, for the final full report of the OSCE mission in Serbia.
Despite all these, the voter turnout was a bit less than 59%. And normally ruling parties seek to avoid winter elections because the electorate tends to be more dissatisfied. The turnout cannot be easily predicted and then controlled because of the weather and the costs. In Serbian terms, is that figure lower or higher than usual?
We could say that it is regular, if we could say, especially for the winter time. There was much stronger turnout only recently in 2012 elections. That was the time when SNS came to power, actually, and those were really crucial elections, very tight. But in recent years, it's generally around 58-59%. 4 years ago, actually, at the elections in 2020, which were held with the boycott of one strong part of the opposition, and turnout was at that time less than 50%.
At the beginning of this podcast, you made a reference to the international constraints. On the 23rd of November, the Republic of Kosovo announced that there are no conditions to organize elections in Kosovo, and that those people with dual citizenship could exercise their right to vote in the territory of Serbia in municipalities located close to the Kosovar border, like Vranje, Raška, or Tutin. The European Union criticized Kosovo's rejection. How would you describe the Belgrade-Pristina relations in light of the recent elections?
The same thing happened also 2 years ago. People were forced to, with organized buses go into Vranje, Raška, and other municipalities there. It's very clear that SNS or the state organized those voters who were going there, so which means we could also question legitimacy of the whole process, but it was important for them to bring at least some people, even symbolically, to vote there. What happened in the meantime, actually, the new Brussels agreement, this French-German proposition about the moving forward, also the obligations that Vucic took with Ohrid agreement and so on. And in the meantime, the whole process was very stuck from the perspective of international community. It was not moving forward so slowly. Then again, some people think, as we said, that early elections were called also to postpone the whole this issue and to buy more time. But Kurti is progressing. He is not waiting, he's not losing the time. In the meantime, there were serious progress from the point of view of Pristina and serious actions that really are improving the statehood of Kosovo over the territories of the north, especially those 4 municipalities, especially police and military forces, de facto, special police forces that are operating now. For some reasons, Serbian people at Kosovo didn't vote at the last municipality elections, and in that way, simply they gave control over the local government in those 4 municipalities to Kurti's people again, helping Kurti to introduce the full control over the North territory. The whole this process is supposed to go on from the perspective of Americans, of international community generally from the West. Vucic is not willing very much to go with that, and I think that he is continuing with the ongoing process in which he is piece by piece giving some concessions to the Kurti and international community and avoiding the last and what is the most wanted from him, and this is signing off and accepting the independence of Kosovo, which is the only thing that Kurti is de facto asking. And for the time being, he is also avoiding allowance of Kosovo into different international organizations like UNICEF, UNESCO, and so on. And the crucial issue this year will be possible move of introducing Kosovo into European Council.
Talking about crucial issues, after the recent passing away of Mr. Istvan Pastor, President of the Assembly of Vojvodina and of the Alliance of Vojvodina Hungarians, what future awaits for the ethnic Hungarian political representation in the new parliament? What do you think?
It's very stable position. As you know, party is led now by the son of late Mr. Pastor. Mr. Balint Pastor is very serious politician. They have also group of already very serious MPs, and their legitimacy among the Hungarian population in Vojvodina and in Serbia generally is not questionable. They are very successful in the sense of what is the most important for them, and this is the influence of Hungarians generally into political life of Serbia and improving of the cultural, educational, and even, if we could say, economical position of the Hungarian community within Serbia. There are many moves that are really satisfactory for the position of Hungarians. Then again, we should not forget that actually this close relationship between Mr. Pastor and Mr. Orban, of course, and very frequent presence of Orban in Serbia and good relationship with Vucic, it's all just something that is continuing for already 12 years. They are having very good general framework for cooperation, which I think will also continue in the future. So there are no any reasons for dissatisfaction or whatever. The alliance of Hungarians will play also a very important role in the Vojvodina parliament. I expect that somebody also from their party will be another president of the Vojvodina parliament. Already in the late years of Mr. Istvan Pastor, Balint was taking over control in the parliament and the party and so on, and many Serbs have very huge respect for him as a serious politician and so on. The biggest problem for Hungarians generally in Serbia and Vojvodina is something that is not connected with the politics, but actually with all the problems that we have with demography. In spite of many improvements of their position and strong support that Hungary is giving, still there is ongoing leaving of the especially young population, first to Hungary and then to the West. But this is something that is happening with everyone in the region, especially with the Croats and Bulgarians at this time.
As a final remark, Miša, would you like to add something to what's been said about the December 2023 elections in Serbia? What aspects of the ballot did you find the most relevant?
The most striking thing is actually that these are the first elections in which European integrations were totally insignificant as an issue. Vucic didn't mention that, I think, neither single time. And even pro-European opposition, which started with the idea of, promoting European values, going faster toward Europe, very quickly gave it up and returned to the issues of corruption, of internal problems with the rule of law, very criminal behavior of some part of the SNS structure, especially at the municipality level. They even started to criticize him for Kosovo politics, and the whole campaign was showing how the discourse of the right, nationalist discourse, some people would say populist discourse, was dominating with this campaign, even among the pro-European voters, and it shows very much where generally Serbian electorate is going. The whole issue of European integration, especially for Serbia, but I think for the whole region, more or less, is totally insignificant because nobody believes that